This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
More countries detect mutated UK coronavirus strain. South Africa battles a new strain as it procures vaccines. And US Congress passes a $900 billion relief package. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program. In business news, South Africa's economy is projected to expand at 3.9% in 2021. And in your sports, South Africa reflects on a difficult year for its football fraternity. We begin with the latest on COVID-19. Concerns are growing that a highly contagious variant of the coronavirus could be spreading outside the United Kingdom. The mutation has already been found in Denmark, Iceland, Italy, the Netherlands, as well as Australia. South Africa also registered a variant, but the World Health Organization says it is not the same one in the United Kingdom. The variant found by the British has a name, B117. Scientists say it could be 70% more contagious than the dominant strain, as it is not deadlier for individuals.
The UK has reported that this new variant transmits more easily, but there is no evidence so far that it's more likely to cause severe disease or mortality. We need to suppress transmission of all SARS-CoV-2.
News that the new strain had been found widely circulating in both Wales and Scotland meant the virus is spreading rapidly across Britain. Despite the optimism of the Prime Minister, the UK government appears to have been caught off guard by the travel bans. Events began here on Saturday when Boris Johnson announced new restrictions on the Christmas period due to this new strain of the coronavirus. News not only to the UK, but also to its neighbours and trading partners who moved swiftly to close borders.
I think the EU I think they're trying to protect themselves. They're trying to protect their populations from this rapid spread and their healthcare services from being overwhelmed that we may see in the UK. So in fact, they're protecting themselves by locking out the UK from these border crossings. That may continue for some time until they understand more about what the virus is doing. And that unfortunately could be a case of watch and wait. Let's see what happens to the UK with this virus, and then we can react. But meanwhile, we're going to keep the borders closed.
Assurances that the government is working on all these issues was little consolation to those stranded at ports and airports, both trying to leave and reach the UK.
We were apprehensive before the flight because we didn't know whether it was going to get cancelled or not. And obviously when you're flying into somewhere where there's a new lockdown restriction, you don't know how you're going to get out of it. It's all really a stressful experience, really. And it comes so quickly, we had no prior notice at all. We just had to go, really.
The border closures amid concern about the new strain of the COVID-19 virus is more bad news for the UK, already reeling from the imposition of strict measures that means millions will not see their loved ones over the Christmas period. Catherine Drew, CGTN, London.
Well, South Africa has also identified a new variant of the coronavirus that is driving a second wave of infections. South African researchers identified the new virus after sequencing hundreds of samples and noticing that it had been dominant in those collected over the past 2 months. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more details.
The Health Ministry announced that a genomics team sequenced hundreds of samples from across the country since the beginning of the pandemic in March. It then noticed that a particular variant has increasingly dominated the findings of the samples collected. The evidence collated strongly suggested that the current second wave being experienced here in South Africa is being driven by that variant.
This new addition to the family is quite aggressive and quite virulent, and so far it counts for 90% of cases that we have seen. And to make it easier for patients to understand, fast. That's why the curve is looking different from the first virus.
Dr. Kutsia says it was expected that the new variant would appear. What was unexpected was how rapidly the variant would become dominant in South Africa. Clinicians have also noted that with this new variant, younger patients with no underlying conditions have been presenting with critical illness.
I normally call it the black sheep because we do not know what this new variant is going to do. What we do know is that it can change itself or mutate, and it's got 3 mutations. The first one, predominantly, in the first wave, we predominantly saw it was elderly people and people with high blood sugar and cholesterol. Now this black sheep that now comes into play here, or the new variant that comes into play, unfortunately also go for young people. And what we have seen, especially in the ICUs, the people who admitted is not only anymore your elderly patients with non-communicable diseases, but it is young people.
The health fraternity is now extremely concerned.
We are very, very worried. Again, because what we have seen is that the curve goes straight up. It doesn't slowly goes up, it goes straight up. It's a problem. It means the infection is much more virulent. Again, we have, during this time of the year, there's a lack of doctors. Everyone, or most of them, are on leave. So there's skeleton staff.
Government has now issued a stern warning against organizing and attending festivals, sporting events and mass gatherings. These events have been identified as super spreaders of the virus. The importance for people to adhere to the non-pharmaceutical interventions of wearing and social distancing has been further emphasized. Yolisa Njomela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's now hear more from CGTN's Andrew Wilson. He's joining us from London. Sumitra Naidu is in Johannesburg with more on that. Andrew, first to you though. UK Prime held an emergency meeting with ministers on Monday on the new coronavirus variant discovered in the country that has prompted a chaotic border shutdown. Could you tell us more about what was discussed in that meeting?
Well, the meeting was an emergency meeting because on Sunday, suddenly these borders were closed with France and then a growing number of countries, as you've reported, all the way up to 40 countries now sealing the UK off effectively from travel in and out. That was enough for the Prime Minister to need some swift updates on exactly what the situation is. He's got 3 concerns. He's got the domestic reaction to this news of this new variant, which is now, according to scientists, widespread across the United Kingdom, but most severe in the southeast. He's got relationships with the European Union as a bloc to consider because they've yet to decide what the united front will be from Brussels in terms of travel in and out of the UK. But most immediate, he's got the port of Dover, which is the closest point to Europe, crossing over to France. He's had a phone call with President Macron yesterday, and most likely French officials will be speaking to British officials again today because they need to work out a way to allow those trucks to start moving again between Dover and the French ports. That's crucial for the in and out delivery systems for the UK, particularly in terms of food for the supermarkets. Now, they are looking at testing lorry drivers and putting in some sort of a system where lorry drivers can get a clear test and then cross the continent, but that's hard to organise. The tests, some people say, are of questionable reliability, even though they're quite swift, and it needs the agreement of the French on the other side. So that is the priority for ministers at the moment. How do we work this out with our nearest neighbour, France?
Sumitra, the new strain of COVID-19 is said to be driving South Africa's second wave. How serious is the situation there?
Yeah, it's become serious quite suddenly, just when it seemed to be almost infections started spiking in the last 2 weeks. We're now at over 930,000 infections, and we've recorded almost 25,000 deaths in South Africa. This second wave is a lot more severe than what we saw in the first lot of infections, and the healthcare system is taking strain once again. In the Western Cape, where the first wave hit hard, the province was the epicenter of the virus. Over 2,000 hospital beds are currently being used there's a huge spike in that province again. There's a substantial resurgence in the virus there and in other provinces across the country. The Eastern Cape is now also a major hotspot. Hospitals are running short of beds there. 3 of the biggest private hospital groups in South Africa have already said they're running low on capacity to take on more patients. Now, the Health Ministry says it's discovered a new strain of the COVID-19 virus. This is even more worrying. This new variant seems to increase the viral load in patients, meaning that carriers can spread the virus more quickly. And unlike the initial strain, this strain affects younger people. Time in South Africa, it's a festive season. Most South Africans are traveling either for holiday or going back to their traditional homes. There are real concerns that this virus will spread more rapidly during this time.
Andrew, and those are the concerns, of course, that carriers can spread the virus more. And you know, it is potentially more threatening than other viruses. But how is the government dealing with the new variant?
Well, they're taking a lot of information on board at the moment. I mean, the UK is fortunate that it does have very sophisticated viral analysis laboratories, so it can keep track in the virus. But bear in mind that the cases of clusters around this new variant of the virus were first reported in September, but they've only been identified significantly now in the past week. So that gives you an idea of the time lag that scientists are dealing with in terms of how to tackle the changes in the virus. They do understand that viruses do change. They will avoid certain situations. They might take on a vaccine in terms of large numbers. So these are all considerations. Thus far, this variant will be 70% more transmissible than the first wave of COVID-19 that was around the UK in the summer. It's not at this stage said to either be any different in terms of the vaccination program or any different in terms of severity of the disease. However, the chief scientific officer only yesterday said publicly that he believes that this new variant, although it's focused in the southeast, is pretty much everywhere in the UK, and so that spread to European countries and beyond is pretty much almost inevitable. If that is the case, it's just a question of timing on that one. There are calls in the UK, particularly from the opposition party at the moment, to start a national lockdown now, or at least as soon as possible, rather than keep the UK in separate tiered restrictive systems as it has at the moment, because they're saying this needs to be stamped on and stamped on hard. But this government so far is reluctant, particularly because it's Christmas. It's also trying to deal with the Brexit deadline for the New Deal, or lack of New Deal in 2 weeks, is reluctant to take any kind of dynamic action in that respect. So thus far we remain with the tiered system at the moment, but already the government has said if you move from a tier 4 level, like London, for example, and you go in the Christmas holidays to another part of the country, you should isolate yourself for 10 days. Well, that's a great suggestion, but there's no program in place yet to facilitate that happening. So clearly there are deep concerns in Westminster about the next move in terms of protecting the health of the country, but not yet the confidence to change the legislation.
As European governments, they're ponder how to deal with the new variant. How has the government in South Africa reacted to that rapid spread of the new strain?
Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa addressed the nation last week announcing tighter restrictions in response to this rapid increase in infections. All large gatherings and events have been banned. All businesses catering in the hospitality and services sector, restaurants, bars and pubs are to close at 10 p.m. A new curfew is in place between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. Most public beaches have also been closed off to the public, and masks have become mandatory in public. The police ministry has also stepped up their services, patrolling beaches and businesses. There's also been increased police presence on the roads. Liquor stores can only open for the public from Monday to Thursday. And in terms of a vaccine, the Department of Health is hoping to get a small quantity through the COVAX facility in the second quarter of next year. The department is speaking, though, to other companies to look at alternatives in the meantime, but there's nothing confirmed as yet. All hospitals have been requested to increase their bed capacity for COVID admissions. And the Ministerial Committee on COVID-19 has also advised hospitals to reduce the number of patient transfers between towns and cities to avoid transporting severely ill patients. At this stage, all travel is still allowed. People coming into South Africa will have to show their COVID test results and other documentation in order to gain entry. South Africans traveling abroad will have to adhere to regulations of the country that they are traveling to. It's not clear at this stage if it will announce further restrictions, but the National Command Council seems to be satisfied with government's response thus far.
All right, Sumitra Naidu joining us there from Johannesburg, and Andrew Wilson in London. To you both, thank you. Well, let's get further analysis on the new COVID-19 strain. I'm joined by Dr. Ngoy Nsenga, the COVID incident manager for the World Health Organization's Regional Office for Africa. Dr. Nsenga, thank you for joining us on the program. Quite a bit of worry there from South Africa, the United Kingdom, and several governments in the European Union. Just how worrying is this new strain?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. As you rightly said, we can see that some countries are really worried. But let me first set this. Dealing with the same virus that we've been dealing with since the beginning. So this is not a new virus. This is the same virus. And say that we have also to bear in mind, like, mutations is not are not special thing, or I mean, they are very common in terms of viruses. So now, variant is presenting some of the characteristics that make countries and people be worried. But at this point, beside the fact that the variant seems to be very much highly transmissible, is kind of the same virus in terms of pathogenicity. So yes, we should be worried. COVID, we are still dealing with COVID. But at the same time, I don't think we should really panic and make the countries or the population panic. This is the same virus.
All right, but how then should African nations set up protections to curb the spread of this new variant? And
again, I think the best way to go is exactly what we've been saying and what we've been telling and what I have been telling to do all this all along. This is the same virus. So let us keep safe. As we said it several times, let us keep safe in keeping social distancing, in wearing masks, in keeping hand hygiene. Those measures still stand. That's the only way our countries can keep our population safe, be it from the former variant or from this new variant. So these measures still stand, and these all situation in all countries.
Dr. Ngoy Nsenga joining us there from the World Health Regional Office for Africa. Thank you. Well, the U.S. Congress has approved a $900 billion coronavirus relief package. President Donald Trump is expected to sign the package into law, and direct payments of $600 will reach Americans by next week. As vaccines continue to roll out and as infections in the country top 18 million, Nathan King reports from the White House.
A arm for the American people and its potentially new president as well. We had the final negotiations of the stimulus bill, $900 billion. Americans have been waiting it for a long time. It will supplement unemployment insurance. It will help shore up businesses, schools, others. What it won't do is include aid directly to states and local governments. It also won't insure businesses against getting sued over COVID liabilities. It's much smaller than the Democrats had hoped. They passed a bill that was basically 3 times as large back in May, but the election result moved Republicans to agree to this, all of which hopefully will come before Christmas, because unemployment insurance was expected to expire just after Christmas. It would have been a very, very difficult time for the American people, and both parties are congratulating themselves.
It is a strong shot in the arm to help American families weather the storm. The 20 million people who would lose unemployment benefits the day after Christmas, help is on the way.
We've agreed to a package of nearly $900 billion. It is packed with targeted policies that help struggling Americans who've already waited entirely too long.
And while deaths, hospitalizations and cases of COVID-19 continue to skyrocket, a shot in the arm, literally, for the American people. Moderna vaccine is now joining the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, is being administered. It looks like millions of doses will be available. Whether there's enough or not is a debate for a later date, but it is good news indeed. And President-elect Joe Biden received his vaccine in front of the cameras, saying it ain't a big deal, and praising healthcare workers too.
This is great hope. I'm doing this to demonstrate that people should be prepared when it's available to take the vaccine. There's nothing to worry about.
Biden joins others, of course. Vice President Mike Pence had his shot last week, all part of a public education campaign to say take the vaccine. As you know, a lot of Americans are reticent about it, but it won't be available to many Americans just yet. Hopes are that everyone gets vaccinated before the middle of next year, but it could stretch into the summer. This is a terrible winter for the United States and, of course, the world as lockdowns continue, as new strains of the virus are seen across the world, and America is continuing to try and cope with more cases, more hospitalizations, more deaths over the Christmas period. Nathan King, CGTN, the White House.
And here in Kenya, doctors working in government hospitals have launched a nationwide strike, citing inadequate insurance benefits and lack of protective equipment while treating COVID-19 patients. Through their Twitter handle, the Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union say there has been no resolution of grievances raised over the last 8 months. The strike has been due to start on December the 7th, but was postponed for 2 weeks to allow more time for talks with the government. According to the Doctors Union, at least 14 doctors have died of the coronavirus in Kenya since the first case was confirmed in the country in March of this year. Well, CGTN's Robert Nagila has been covering the doctor strike since yesterday and joins me now live from Nairobi. Robert, what is the latest with the strike?
Well, as we speak, operations in the country's public hospitals have all stalled, pushing the country's health system into a crisis. Now, it's not just doctors who are on strike. The industrial action beginning barely 24 hours ago. We're talking about nurses, clinical officers, all very vital to any operations in a hospital. They've been on strike for the past 2 weeks. As we speak at this particular moment, a majority of public hospitals across the entire country have all shut their doors to any patients or anyone seeking any medical assistance, forcing members of the public to go to private hospitals. A lot of them telling us today that it's just too expensive for them. So some would rather go back home and wait for this to wash over. Now, the government is urging health workers to go back to work, warning that those who do not go back to work will be fired and replaced. However, the health workers are insisting that they will remain on strike until their conditions are met. What are those conditions? Well, some of them are they want PPEs, protective equipment, especially for those who are dealing with COVID-19 cases in hospitals. They want better allowances, and they also want their welfare looked at. However, at this particular moment, doesn't seem to be any talks ongoing between the two sides. Beatrice?
Well, Robert, Kenya lawmakers are expected to deliberate and decide whether to extend tax relief measures enacted to cushion effects of the coronavirus. What are you hearing on this issue, and what are the legislators likely to decide?
Well, there's going to be a first reading this afternoon before Parliament, and then a second reading. Ostensibly, this will pass. Which way it goes will depend on which way the parties lean. Now, for the government itself, it is a situation of damned if they do and damned if they don't. They realize that a lot of Kenyans have had it rough for the past few months since the COVID-19 pandemic was upon us. They know that a lot of Kenyans have lost jobs and they will be seeking some sort of relief. However, on the flip side, the government does need the money. About 65 billion worth of taxes was wiped off the first time when this relief measures came into place. So they need the money to sustain the budget, to cushion the budget. So we'll have to wait and see which way it goes. But a lot of people think that parliamentarians will be rooting for these relief measures because a lot of people on the ground, their constituents, are really suffering going into this festive period. Beatrice?
Robert Nagila in Nairobi, thank you. You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Russia and Rwanda send military support to the Central African Republic to quell election violence. And over 80 abducted children rescued from gunmen in Katsina in Nigeria.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's now head to the Central African Republic, where President Faustin Archange Touadera has rejected calls by opposition parties to postpone the December 27th elections over rising insecurity in the capital. Rwanda and Russia sent in troops and supplies after days of armed conflict by rebel groups. The fighting is now being blamed on former President Francois Bozize.
Amid the charged presidential campaigns in Bangui, conflict has been raging in the outskirts. Opposition parties have been calling for the postponement of the presidential polls until fighting among rebel groups is addressed. But the incumbent President Faustin Touadera says the exercise should go on. His government is blaming former President Francois Bozize of fanning the conflict.
Must we take up arms to resolve problems? Must we take up arms to get into power? I don't think so. We have institutions of the Republic that are in place. We have institutions born out of Bangui Forum and which are operational today. So there is no reason, there is no institutional crisis. We must simply go on with the election.
Bozize, whose candidature was rejected by the courts, has denied this. Opposition candidate Anicet Georges Dologuele, who is a supporter of Bozize, has joined other opposition activists in calling for the rescheduling of the polls as campaigning has become untenable.
Elections are just a few days away, and what is going on makes it impossible to hold elections. If you listen to the statement of the CORD 2020 and the position that we have taken, it is useless to pretend nothing is happening and to keep shouting that on the 27th there will be elections. But look, there is shooting all over the place. Who is going to vote?
Rwanda and Russia have confirmed sending troops to Bangui as fighting spread to Mbaiki, a town that lies 100 kilometers from the capital. This has raised concerns, with the United Nations calling on all parties to stick to the peace deal signed in early 2019.
The Members of the Security Council condemned in the strongest terms violations of the peace agreement and violence perpetrated by armed groups and other militia. The Members of the Security Council called on all actors to urgently cease hostile actions and work towards ensuring conditions conducive to the holding of the upcoming elections. The Members of the Security Council considered that the elections must be held on 27 December in full respect of the constitutional timelines and condemned all attempt to conduct the CAR to a new political transition, violating the CR Constitution.
President Touadera took office in 2016, 3 years after the ouster of Francois Bozize, which also plunged the nation into a bitter civil war. However, his government has been struggling to maintain stability as large parts of the Central African nation remain beyond government control. Jane Keo, CGTN.
The security situation in northern Nigeria appears to be worsening, with bandits increasingly targeting school children. 48 hours after the release of 344 schoolboys kidnapped by bandits from a boarding school in the northwest Katsina state, gunmen abducted about 80 others. The children were returning home after attending a religious ceremony. The school children were, however, rescued by security agents and local vigilantes. CGTN's Deji Badmos brings us the latest on the situation.
Allah has answered our prayers, Mr. President. These young men are here. And it is now our responsibility to make sure that it never happens again.
But it did happen again. Barely 24 hours after the Katsina state governor made that remark, after the release of the 344 Kankara schoolboys, the bandits struck again, this time kidnapping about 84 Islamic school students. Security forces backed by local vigilantes were, however, able to respond swiftly and rescued all the students after a gun battle with the bandits. That incident, so soon after the earlier abductions, has shocked many, and it appears schools are now becoming a target.
We need to implement the Safe School Declaration. We signed that declaration, but we are yet to implement it. So I think the whole of government, the state government, the federal government, should come together with the legislature and seek ways to implement that Safe School Declaration so that all the schools in the country would be safe for our pupils.
The Safe Schools Declaration seeks the commitment of countries to protect students, teachers, schools and universities from attacks during armed conflict. Nigeria signed up to the declaration last year. Despite that commitment, schools are still being attacked, especially in the north.
I run a consultancy and we keep a database of these incidences. Between 2014 and to date, over 1,400 schools have been either attacked, destroyed, by these conflict actors in Nigeria. Then about 1,300 students and teachers have either been killed or disappeared as a result of this action. So we have enough reason to have concluded that our schools are vulnerable. They are soft targets and are being attacked by these groups. And that means we should have taken more action to protect our schools.
To deal with the unfolding situation, most of Nigeria's northern states have now shut down schools. It's a big blow to education programs in the affected region.
Mr. President has expressed great concern over the declining security situation in the country. He is extremely unhappy about what is happening, and he feels that even though the security agencies are doing their best is not good enough for him, and he wants an immediate reversal of the current trend, an immediate reversal of our misfortunes in all their dimensions.
President Muhammadu Buhari has come under increasing pressure lately to fire his security chiefs and appoint new ones over the worsening security situation. But he has so far resisted the pressure to do so, and instead pledged that the government will tackle the rising insecurity. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
The United States has filed criminal charges against a third alleged conspirator in the 1988 bombing of the Pan Am Flight 103. The Boeing 747 aircraft exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland, killing 270 people, 190 of them being Americans. The suspect, Abu Aguila Mohammed Masoud Khair al-Marimi, is a former senior Libyan intelligence official. Masoud has been charged with 2 criminal counts relating to the bombing. He is currently in Libyan custody. U.S. officials are, however, hopeful that Libya will allow Masoud to be tried in the United States.
We will continue to pursue justice for all who were responsible for this bombing. But today is a small victory in that conquest. We are grateful the Department of Justice and the FBI continue to fight for justice for all Americans.
According to the criminal complaint affidavit, Masoud built the bomb that destroyed Pan Am 103 and worked with McGrahy and FEMA to carry out the plot. The affidavit also alleges that the operation had been ordered by the leadership of Libyan intelligence, and that after the downing of the aircraft, Gaddafi had personally thanked Massoud for the successful attack on the United States.
And your business news is coming up next. Here's what's ahead. South Africa's economy projected to expand 3.9% in 2021. And Egypt's economic forecasts show positive growth over the next 2 years.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
The fighters, the givers, the protectors, the ones who patched us up to help us heal, and the ones who picked us up when we tumbled in the face of COVID-19. The African spirit stared the pandemic in the face. From north to south, east to west, warriors stepped up, and many of us are still here because they were there. We celebrate them in our special series, CGTN Pandemic Warriors.
South Africa's economy is now forecast to expand 3.9% next year after contracting nearly twice that rate in 2020. That's according to a recent Reuters poll. This is after a strong third quarter performance, which rebounded strongly as coronavirus restrictions were relaxed, with mining and manufacturing leading an expansion across all sectors. From Johannesburg, here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola with more details.
The economy shrank due to government-induced COVID-19 related restrictions imposed since March, and it's been suggested that the economy would contract by 7.4% this year and take some time to fully recover to pre-2019 levels.
Because simply there's some things we don't know. We don't know if the second wave is going to impact the first quarter of next year, which would then result in very bad growth outcomes. But I think if everything works and we don't have a long lockdown, we end all these lockdown situations early in January, then I think 3.5% to 4% is very, very likely. And on the positive side, if things go really well for us and commodity prices keep and remain high and go a bit higher, we could even reach 5%, which would be amazing.
There's another silver lining brought about by the pandemic. The country normally runs a current account deficit. It's been in surplus for several months now because consumers haven't been spending as much as previously.
And that positiveness with our current account will impact on other things like the currency and probably on interest rates. And that is a very big positive for South Africa over the next year that I foresee.
The key data point being monitored is the broad unemployment rate, now pegged at 43% and likely to increase.
And the reason for this is that we have lost a lot of jobs, but we're still likely to lose a little bit more because as the help from the TERS and from other government initiatives fade, a lot of places will be laid bare.
The country's economy remains in dire straits, and it's going to take focus and commitment from all the players involved to get it back on track to at least pre-COVID conditions. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Egypt's economy is forecast to keep growing over the next 2 fiscal years. The latest forecasts estimate growth of between 2.8% to 4% in 2021 and anywhere between 5.5% and 6.5% in 2022. From Cairo, here's CGTN's Yasa Hakim.
The International Monetary Fund has just delivered to Egypt the second batch of a $5.2 billion standby loan and said the North African country's economic performance has exceeded expectations. According to the Washington-based lender, Egypt recorded one of the highest growth rates in 2020 due to its diversified economy and successful implementation of reforms initiated 4 years ago.
It was a collective effort by the presidency, the government and parliament. In parliament, we passed legislations that allowed the government to move quickly and contain the effects of the coronavirus. We must also stress that the economic reforms of the last few years have been fundamental in creating a strong base for the economy to weather the storm, unlike other countries that witnessed huge economic and social setbacks.
High demand on Egyptian bonds, an 11% increase in foreign direct investments, and the record amount of remittances from people in the diaspora have made up for the losses in tourism and slowdown in industrial manufacturing. Going forward, Finance Minister Mohammed Maid expects growth to double over the next 2 fiscal years and touch 6%.
As you can see, projects are working at full speed everywhere in the country. The tourism and hotel sectors are slowly recovering, the aviation sector as well. Sectors that depend on trade and exports are also working. Then we have shops, restaurants, cinemas, theaters. All these will begin to operate at full capacity soon. Along with the strong petroleum and construction sectors, they will push growth rates between 5.5 to 6.5%.
But Maid has warned keeping a positive outlook is not an easy feat, considering the pandemic was still ravaging most parts of the world.
Dealing with the coronavirus is vital because the pandemic has had a big toll on us. It's essential that we continue on this path. We should not divert off the delicate policies we are implementing now. If we lose balance, then for example, the budget deficit will become too big to handle. Debts will mushroom. Funds for projects will diminish. It will be a big problem. But as long as things continue as it is, we will be fine.
The government believes the next period is about building on this year's success, strengthening sectors damaged by the effects of the pandemic, and improving living conditions for Egyptians who suffered from the economic fallout caused by the novel coronavirus. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
In South Africa, drugstore chain Dis-Chem Pharmacies has signed several deals to expand its presence in Africa's most industrialized economy as it seeks to develop its business. Dis-Chem says it will be acquiring healthcare group Medicare Health for $19 million. South Africa's second-largest retail pharmacy chain will also buy an 87.5% stake in clinical management software firm Healthforce and a 25% stake in healthcare solutions provider Kalo Holdings. Dis-Chem has been on an acquisition spree this year. In May, it entered into a conditional arrangement to buy Baby City for about $30 million. That deal is set to take effect in January of 2021. In Kenya, telecoms giant Safaricom and its partners have signed an agreement to borrow up to $500 million from America's Sovereign Wealth Fund, U.S. International Development Finance Corporation Fund. Through a joint venture called Global Partnership for Ethiopia, Safaricom and its parent companies Vodafone Group and Vodacom Group will use the funding to expand into Ethiopia's telecommunications market. They are bidding for one of 2 telecommunications licenses being auctioned in the country. Safaricom's borrowings have so far been limited to local banks, from which it has mostly taken short-term debt denominated in Kenya shillings. Africa's biggest cement producer, Dangote Cement, is planning a buyback of the company's shares next week to boost shareholder value. The company will repurchase as much as 10% of the issued capital, starting with the first tranche of 85.2 million shares. The purchase will be done in the open market on December the 30th and ends the day after or when the entire target number of shares are repurchased, whichever is earlier. Dangote Cement is the first Nigerian company to undertake the exercise. Previous attempts have failed due to suspicion by regulators and investors. The cement maker had a cash and cash equivalent of about $450 million on its books as of September. Facebook and Alphabet's Google have agreed to cooperate and assist one another in the case of an investigation into their collaboration in online advertising. That's according to an redacted draft version of a lawsuit filed by 10 U.S. states against Google. The suit alleges that the two tech giants had agreed in a publicized deal in 2018 to start giving Facebook's advertiser clients the option to place ads within Google's network of publishing partners. Google and Facebook were also reportedly aware that the agreement could trigger antitrust investigations and discussed how to deal with them. This is not the only suit against Google. Attorney generals from 35 U.S. states last week filed another antitrust lawsuit accusing the $1 trillion company of illegal monopoly. And we still have more news for you here on the program. To stay with us.
The year 2020. It was a year like none before, shaped by the COVID-19 pandemic. Africa, seemingly spared the worst of it, still took a huge hit with unprecedented disruptions to healthcare, the social and economic order. Climate change also took its toll on Africa. Shifts in temperature affected food productivity and the availability of water and the overall security of the African people. The continent saw major political changes too. Several countries held successful elections despite the pandemic, while others made strides towards lasting peace. This was 2020, a year unique in so many ways. CGTN will highlight some of the top stories we covered as the year unfolded.
Invasion in several parts of the country.
To South Africa now, where an extraordinary art exhibition comprising of artwork created during the year's unprecedented lockdown is underway. CGTN's Travers Andrews has more on this report.
Home is where the art is an exhibition for and by the people of Cape Town, and is an open submission of works created by children, emerging and established artists in different artistic mediums. The collection encompasses nearly 2,000 artworks and is on display at the Zeitz Museum of Contemporary Art Africa, and it's meant to use art as a way of celebrating the reopening of the museum after 7 months of closure due to the lockdown.
Unlike any other exhibition we've done, this was an open call to the public of Cape Town. It meant talking to public throughout Cape Town, going out into communities and actually speaking to them one-on-one about their work. This was a very big and timely process.
The abundance of talent and enthusiasm shown by the collaborators is clear to see, and so is the inclusivity of the exhibition. Paintings by established artists can be seen besides drawings done by children. The different mediums used include paintings, photography, sculptures, and even a mural.
Through gathering artworks from the various communities throughout Cape Town, a couple of important themes started to lift out of the artworks on display. One of those is garden, inside and outside, relations, how we relate to one another, as well as time. Time is something we've been consistently marking throughout lockdown. So these are the broad themes that we were looking at.
The exhibition also showcases works from established artists such as Liddell Moe, whose submission speaks to various issues including monumentality.
My work centers around the figure, and I was looking at this notion of dropping to your knees as an act of submission, and then staying there as this kind of notion of waiting, this temporary in-between state of waiting for something, but also acknowledging much bigger powers.
With the festive season underway, the curators hope that many people will come to see the collection, which runs until the second week of January 2021. Unlike many other exhibitions, Home is where the art will not run as a hybrid event, because the museum wants enthusiasts to experience the true expression of the artist, and that can only be done by seeing the collection firsthand. Travers Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And your sports news is coming up next. Here's what's ahead. South Africa reflects on a difficult year for its football fraternity.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find